Well, hey there, everybody. It's Pastor Devin from Family Worship Center. I'm coming to you with the next session in our trauma series, dealing with trauma series from the great folks at Reboot Recovery Ministries. So appreciate them making this series available. And I think it's so fitting. Today's topic is about the recovery process. Now, what they're going to talk about is not the kind of recovery like we are currently seeing naturally, where things are just opening back up and people are starting to go back to work and restaurants are opening and stores are opening, and there are a lot of things that are different, but at least we're starting to get back into that process slowly of having things going on. They're going to focus on is a little bit different kind of recovery, because again, what we're doing in this series is we are working on putting some emotional tools in our tool belts to help us through crisis like this. But this also applies if you've ever lost a child, if you've had a divorce, if you've gone through an illness, if you have a loved one who's gone through an illness, if you've had a big financial hit, lost a job, all sorts of things that can cause trauma in our lives. And if we don't know how to go through this process and to focus on the right things, a lot of times people end up in depression. They end up spiraling into making bad decisions, cutting themselves off from people that love them and care about them, and all of those things. And here's the thing: we don't want that for you. I don't want that for you. God doesn't want that for you. We want you to go forward, whether you have been just absolutely traumatized by the COVID pandemic, or whether it's just been an inconvenience in your life. At some point in your life, something's going to hit you. Life is going to hit you with something that's going to knock the wind out of your lungs. It's going to knock you off your feet. You're going to be stuck going, what do I do? What do I do? And my hope through this series, through these teachings, is that there will be something that will speak to you and help you in that moment. Say, you know what? I know how to respond. I know what to do next. Not that it's easy, not that it's simple, not that all of our problems go away because we've watched this series and we've learned a couple of things, but it becomes more manageable when we realize I don't have to do this by myself. I don't have to figure all this out. And that's why we're putting these out there. That's why we're making them available. That's why we're leaving them online and sharing them with all of our Rocks friends and everything. And so we're going to jump into this video today about recovery, the recovery process. I believe it's going to be very, very helpful for some of us. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn something from it. And I hope that it speaks to you as you go through whatever it is you might be going through today. So here we are as we jump into this next session on the recovery process from the great folks again, a Reboot Recovery. Their ministry is specifically to soldiers and their families dealing with combat trauma, but they have some great resources out there. I encourage you, Google them, check them out, see what else they've got available. They're wonderful, wonderful folks, wonderful, wonderful ministry. So here we go. Let's jump into the video now.
We're in the fourth part of our 5-part series called Reboot Recovery Crisis Edition, and I'm really, really excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. And for a change, it's going to be a little upbeat, a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more optimistic than some of the doom and gloom dealing with the crisis, right? We're going to look at what happens as we start transitioning, right? We've been talking about these 3 phases: safety, stability, and now support, right? And so we're going to go through these 3 phases. And so this is now we're transitioning out of stability, we're transitioning into support. This is the phase where we start to sort of move out of stability, because we have some normalcy again. We've got some balance. We've got some things in our life. We don't wake up every single day saying, what am I going to do? What's bad things going to happen today? We start to plan again. Maybe we plan a vacation. Maybe we plan for the future. We apply for a new job. We build new relationships. Whatever it is, we do all these things because finally it's safe to start hoping again. And that's where it really starts to happen as we transition out of stability, because stability breeds that confidence. Stability is the environment in which we're able to start hoping. Without stability, we're just hanging on for dear life, trying to cope in the moment. But we're transitioning out of that now. And it's at this point that there is some risk, because if we don't understand the need for support, what happens is that stability is still very fragile, and it can be taken away in just an instant. You know, imagine that I wanted to build a skyscraper. I say, you know what, I want this to be the tallest skyscraper. I want it to be the envy of skyscrapers. I want people to walk by and say, man, that is a good looking skyscraper. Well, obviously, one of the first things that has to be done, we have to build a solid foundation. We have to build that. And let's say we start building it along the way, we get busy, we try to do it too fast, and we end up accidentally missing a step, right? We miss putting in some support beams or making the floor levels. I don't really know anything about building, but you can bear with me in this, right? We end up missing some step. And the building gets built, and people start coming in, and they say, man, Evan, this is the best building. Hundreds of people are coming in, and they start saying, man, Evan's doing really good. Look how awesome this building is. And then one day I'm in a meeting, and I notice there's some cracks up on the ceiling. And I think to myself, that's really strange. But those cracks aren't necessarily indicative of a much deeper rooted issue, because I may not see it right away. Unless I was willing to go in and start researching what the risk of those cracks were, I just kind of cover them up, a little spackle, a little paint, move on. And then some more cracks appear, and then some more. And pretty soon there's some crumbly spots. But I can't let people know. I have to keep up this appearance thing. I have to keep up, because after all, people think this building is amazing. I've got too much time, too much energy, too much money invested in this building to suddenly let you know, or let me even really come to the belief that there's something deeper going on. I've got too much wrapped in it. And so I hide it. And I'll start noticing, I feel a little paranoid. I walk into a room and I instantly get nervous. Like, oh, I hope somebody notices that crack up there, right? And then one day the unthinkable happens. The building collapses. Not only with just me in it, but with all the people, all the guests, all the people that were in it with me. And we all get either hurt or killed, or something bad happens. And you might think, man, Evan, this analogy is very intense. But I'm here to tell you, I have seen it hundreds of times. People work through the stability phase. They start to feel like, man, I've got this. I'm doing something good. And all of a sudden, they become aware that maybe there was something they missed in the healing process, or something that they thought they dealt with has come back now into their life. And rather than pausing, being transparent and addressing it, they want to keep up appearances. They want to move on. And so they just brush it off. And they keep doing this for a period of time until one day their life collapses. And it's not just them that's taken down by the collapse. They take down their family. Sometimes they take down a church, or they take down a business with them. And we don't want that to be our fate, because stability is a double-edged sword. Well, it's great that it breeds normalcy. You know what else it can breed? Pride, overconfidence, self-reliance. And these things are killers. They are killers to stability. So the fastest way to ruin that skyscraper is through pride or overconfidence. And most of the time, if I've missed a step, I didn't even maybe do it intentionally back then. So I really shouldn't feel shame about going back and readdressing it, but for some reason we still do. Because we don't want to have to go back into that mess again. We feel like we've risen out of that. It's like if I was to go from poor class to rich class, I don't want to go back among the poor class again. I've moved on. And that's kind of how we feel about it. Well, safety and stability, that was back then, but now I'm here. And we get that pride, that voice of pride. But we can avoid this fate if we have the right foundation in place. And that's really what we talk about when we say support. What is support? Support is anyone or anything that helps bear the weight of our lives. I mean, let's just say it's simple. Life becomes too heavy to bear alone, especially after crisis. Right? It's important that we have someone. We're too busy, pulled in too many different directions to see our lives from all the vantage points necessary to maintain long-term healing. We need support in our lives. Have you ever been to a stress test at the doctor for your heart? They put you in this treadmill and they put all these sensors and they tell you to start running. And your heart appears totally normal until the stress test. But the stress test is designed to determine if there are any underlying hidden problems in your life. In essence, that's exactly what I mean by support. You see, it's simply this. Support is being willing, being humble enough, but being willing to put yourself in situations or around people who will test your emotional, mental, and spiritual health. That's what support looks like. But here's the problem. I don't like when my life is scrutinized. I don't like when people point out my weaknesses. Do you? And so there's this voice that tells us, we don't need that, right? And so then we can start, but I would much rather have that in my life than not know something was terribly wrong, wouldn't you, right? So we're caught in that middle place. Because when I say the word support, if I said, man, that's a supportive person, what words come to mind for you? What do you think of? You think of a person who's encouraging, sympathetic, reassuring, myriad of other positive words. Maybe you picture like a hype man, like every decision you make, it's like, yeah, that was a great choice, right? That's what we kind of pictured. But I want you to hear me clearly. When we've experienced crisis, there's this tendency we have to surround ourselves with people who support our every decision, who say, yeah, that coping mechanism, that's a good choice you're making right now, even if it's not. Friends, that's not called support. You know what that's called? Enablement. That's called enablement. And we don't want that. And here's the thing about enablement instead of support. Enablement, it's tricky. It gives the illusion of support without the protection of it. Have you ever found somebody who, when they have this big disaster in their life, they look around at all their friends like, man, why didn't you say something? How could you have not seen this coming? And it's usually because they were not truly supportive in the first place. They were enabling friends, not supportive friends, right? They were focused on their own deal, not on your deal, right? And so that's how this starts to happen. It's become almost cliche in celebrity culture. I can't hardly think of a famous person that comes to mind that hasn't went from hero to zero in the eye of the public in a moment, because suddenly they're caught up in some scandal or some massive, whatever issue. And we wonder what happened. How could no one have seen that coming? And it's usually because they isolated themselves to the point that no one is speaking truth into their life anymore. You see, they're not putting themselves in situations or around people, right, who test them. They're not putting themselves in vulnerable situations anymore to be scrutinized. And while our lives may have found stability, that will be short-lived. So check this out. Long-term recovery. Long-term recovery is more about living a life of transparency than it is completing a series of steps. And sometimes we miss that point. It's not about just working a process or doing a 12-step or a 500-step process. It's not about steps. It's about embracing this idea that I'm going to live a life of transparency. I'm going to open myself up to being scrutinized, to being put under a stress test. And it's a beautiful thing, because think about it almost like a bowling alley. These support things, right? These guardrails that pop up, they're meant to keep us in play. They're meant to keep us in the game so we can keep playing and have a chance to win. And without those guardrails, guess where I end up most of the time? In the gutter. So support is meant to keep us out of the gutter so we can keep playing the game. But how do we find support? Where do I go? How do I look for it? There's two things that you can do. First, you can get regular checkups. Earlier we've talked about this idea before of transparency, but in the Christian faith, there's this idea called confession. Now, that's not the same as going to confessional. That's a little different, but I'm talking about the idea of confession, which simply means to uncover or to make known. In James chapter 5, verse 16, God had this idea long before Evan Owens did on this video, right? He says this. He says, therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other that you may be healed. Do you notice there's a formula there? Confess your sins to one another plus pray for each other will equal healing, right? He gives us the formula for support. But you see, this idea of confession, it's saying I'm going to make known my cracks. I'm going to make known where I'm struggling. And I'm going to invite people in to my life in a transparent, honest, authentic, loving, trusting relationship kind of way to scrutinize me and to give me different vantage points that I can't see on my own. He knew that. And we should too. And this may be a group from your church. It may be a friend at work. It could be a lot of different people, right? But the point is, you got to have somebody in your life who you give permission to ask you the questions that you wish nobody would ask you. Someone once said, Evan, you'll only go as far as your support system enables you to go. And I've really found that to be true in that journey. And sometimes I've picked people in my support system that I shouldn't have picked. So look at the people in your support network. Do you want to be like them when you grow up? Are they people who you can say, I want a marriage like that. I want a financial situation like that. I want a faith like that. Or are they people that you look at and be like, I don't want a marriage like that. I don't want to be in their financial situation. I don't want to be in, whatever it is. Because if those are your supporting cast, they can't lead you someplace they've never been, right? You have to have the right people. So look at the cast, get regular checkups, set a regular time every month or two to sit down and say, here it is, here I am, vulnerable, transparent, ask me anything and I'll tell you the truth. That's so healing. You'll be amazed how much it helps. The second thing you can do, though, is work out your mental, emotional, and spiritual muscle. Just like any muscle, all three of those need to be exercised. So if you're trying to get the spiritual side, get in the time, quiet time, read your Bible every day. Start going to church again, whatever it is. If it's mental, get on YouTube, watch a bunch of videos about how to do deep breathing to control anxiety, or look up techniques on how to beat depression, naturally, or whatever it may be. There's a billion resources now to help people work out their mental, emotional, and spiritual muscles. Take advantage of those. Be intentional and go and schedule time to do those things. The more you work them out, the stronger you'll get. The more practical those things will become in your life, the more helpful they'll become. And in turn, guess what? You can start sharing those with other people then. And it becomes this beautiful circle of care and of love. So again, you find safety. You build stability, which we've talked about in the previous two. And now you need support. You need support. Imagine building a skyscraper without any supporting beams underneath. It wouldn't work. You've got to have that. And these difficult seasons that we go into really are in many ways designed to reveal something about ourselves, just like a stress test. Again, in the biblical world, in the Christian context, we call this the process of sanctification, which literally just means to be made holy. Or the way I like to think of it is every trial I go through, every challenge is an opportunity to chip away some things and make me a little bit more like God wants me to be in the first place, right? And that's the way that we can start viewing these challenges if we have the right support in place. Because sometimes it's God that directly chips away, but guess who it is sometimes that chips away at the impurities and imperfections of our life? It's my friends. It's my support system who challenge me, who says, Evan, this is something I see in your life, man, that's not good. You need to get rid of it. You need to be careful. This is a risk. This crack here could be something a whole lot more serious than what you think it might be. And you might think that I'm nuts or a zealot or whatever, but here's the thing. My wife said it best when she talked about this idea of sanctification, this idea of experiencing a redemption through pain. She said this statement, and it's forever stuck with me. I'm going to read it to you. It says, if trauma was my personal intersection with the brokenness of the world, then recovery was my personal intersection with the redemptive heart of God. That's what recovery is. True recovery is when you intersect with the redemptive heart of God. And you might think crazy, but I want that for you more than anything else. I don't care if you've never watched these videos. I don't care. What I want for you most is that you have that intersection. Because God may not have brought the trauma into your life, but he can deliver you from it, right? He may not take away the pain, but he will join you in it. He promises that while he may turn up the heat, which a lot of times that's what crisis feels. It feels like somebody's turned up the heat in our life. He promises that his guidance will come out like gold. And that's the beautiful part. As we get into the supporting phase, we have to realize that process of temperatures going up and down in our lives and that refining, that process of taking the impurities out of us, we can start to look at that as a beautiful process. As we start making plans and building a higher, taller, bigger building off of this stable foundation, we can start to say, man, I am so grateful for these amazing supportive people in my life who challenge me to be the best version of myself. This next final session is the last one we're going to talk about, and we're actually going to give you guys a formula, a specific plan on how you can start helping other people who might be struggling with crisis in their own lives. Because now, as you start to heal, guess what? You can become a healer. That's the expected kind of circle that happens. And we're going to get into that in the next section. Until then, if you have questions, let us know. You can always email us or message us through our website. We're here to help you. And always keep moving forward as we overcome trauma together. God bless.
Well, that's so good and so important that we evaluate the pillars in our foundation, the people. Again, as a pastor, I can speak to this, that there are so many times where people fight to get out of situations. I think of specifically people that I've worked with in ministry over the years, trying to get out of abusive situations specifically. And they get out of the house, but they don't get out of the lifestyle. They don't change the friends. They don't, obviously you can't change your family per se, but they stay connected to enablers. They stay connected to people that were feeding that, or that knew but didn't say anything, or wondered but didn't ask, or things like that. And a lot of times they end up back in, if not that same relationship, a relationship with similar issues. And it's because the support in their life is not what it needs to be. It's so important. Listen to me. If you never step foot through the doors of my church, okay. I mean, I invite you, come. We're getting ready to relaunch. Sure, wonderful. But if you never step foot through the doors of my church, that's fine. But I'm going to ask you, where are you stepping foot where you can find real support? And I understand, I'll be the first one to admit that churches can be very judgmental places for a lot of people. We've done, especially in American Christianity, the last decade or two, we've done a bad job in some cases of making the church a place where people can come who are hurting, to find healing. But that's what the church is really supposed to be all about. Is it's, Jesus told us himself. He said, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. And he wasn't just talking about people that sick, although he definitely did that kind of healing too. He was talking about people who were emotionally sick, uh, relationally sick, spiritually sick, tired, worn out. And I understand. And so my challenge to you, my I implore you, I beg you, if you have been in a situation and you say, well, that's my experience and I don't want to go back to that, go somewhere else. Try another church. All right. I mean, there's a bunch out there. If you're not in my area, or you don't want to come to my church, that's fine. Call me, text me. I will find out where a good church is in your area, and I'll send them, and I'll make sure they know you're coming if you want me to. All right. Because we are not meant to live in isolation. And especially when we go through trauma, if you've lost a loved one, if you've lost a job, if you've experienced some sort of pain in your life, you're not intended to go through it alone. You need people who, as he talked about in the video, as Chris it can ask you the hard questions. What's going on? How are you doing? But sometimes you also just need people who are going to be there, and they don't say anything. I remember a time in my life when my parents were getting a divorce. And I was a teenager, and of course that's always a difficult time for them. I'm sure it was a difficult time, uh, but for me, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do. And I remember one day my pastor picking me up from um, my house, and we just drove. And you know what, he said hi, it's good to see you, I mean, that sort of thing. But after the pleasantries were exchanged, we just drove, and we ended up at a McDonald's. And we walked in and we got 2 dishes of ice cream, just the vanilla ice cream with hot fudge, and we just sat there. And eventually we started talking. Eventually I started talking about, I don't understand. Why is this happening? Did I do something? All those things that a kid, yeah, I was a teenager, but I was a preteen, if you will, didn't understand what was really going on, and all of that. But for a while, he just, and when we started talking, he talked through some things, and he helped me to see, this isn't your fault. You didn't do it. All of that you would expect. But that's not how it started. He was just there. That was the moment that I really decided I wanted to be a pastor. Now, I believe God called me into ministry and told me, this is what I want you to do with your life. But that was the moment when I said, that is what I want to do. because you realize those two things are not always the same. What God wants, what we want, and I'm getting off track. But I thought, man, because it was so, he didn't say anything. He was just there, and it was so helpful. It was so calming. It brought so much peace to me, and so much stability and support, as he was talking about, just being there. And I know a lot of people don't have that. We have a lot of people that we talk to. We got our friends that we ride with, right? But yet when we really get into crisis, a lot of times those people disappear. Or they're not really as there as they said they'd be, or as we expected them to be. Who are your people? Who are your people? And if you don't have them, then I want to encourage you and challenge you to make sure you are in an environment, whether that's an AA group, whether that's a reboot combat recovery group, trauma recovery group, whether that's a church, a small group, a Bible study, a knitting club. I mean, but somewhere where you can talk to people and have that kind of relationship with people, and they don't have to be all up in your business all the time, but where you can be honest and you can be real, and you can have people who will look at you and say, what are you doing? But who also will look at you and just say, what do you need? We need that in our lives. And I pray that you have that. But if you don't, I pray that you will desperately seek it. Ask God to bring those people into your life. Ask God to show you who those people are that you need to pursue that kind of relationship with. Because sometimes, and I've had this in my life too, sometimes I've looked around in different situations I've been in and been like, okay, I don't have that right now. I mean, I've got my wife, but what happens if my wife is the one that I'm struggling with? And I've looked around and I've said, okay, who, God, bring me somebody, show me somebody, send me to somebody, have them call me, tell me to call them, whatever, so that I had that connection, because we need that. We need that so much. It's such an important part, because a lot of times, again, I talk to people who are struggling and going through things. They know what to do. You might be experiencing something right now where you know what the answer is to get out of your problem, to get out of your mess. If you're struggling financially, I mean, the answer is spend less money, budget, save, pay off debt, get a second job. Those things, right? If your problem is anger, you know that you need to work on your breathing, you need to work on your thinking, you need to work on gratefulness, you need to work on this and work on all those things. Like a lot of times when people come to me for counseling and they're having trouble in their marriage or trouble, it's not that they don't know what to do. It's that they have a hard time doing it. Because when you're isolated, you'll be defeated. When you're isolated, you'll be defeated. And if you've gone through, especially if you've gone through trauma, it's not the time to allow yourself to be isolated. It's not the time to cut yourself off. I know it can hurt. I know it can be uncomfortable. I know it can be difficult. But it's a time to press in and reach out and say, I need your support. I need your encouragement. And again, sometimes people will let you down. Sometimes people that you expect to be there for you, they won't be. And that hurts too. But when that happens, you just keep going and know that I'm not going to stop. My healing, my health, my recovery is too important for me to get tripped up by somebody who didn't follow through or wasn't what I thought they'd be, because I know there is somebody there for me. There is somebody that I know, somebody who cares, and I'm going to find them. I'm going to find them. And I believe one of the best places to do that is through your local church, through a small group, through those kinds of connections. But if it's not there, find it somewhere. Find it somewhere. People who will speak into your life encouragement, who will speak into your life truth. That's why it can't be, your buddies at the bar, right? Because they'll tell you what you want to hear. And they'll be encouraging, but they're not going to challenge you. They're not going to be the ones to say, hey, you need to knock that off. You need to think differently. We're here for you. We're listening to you, but you need to think differently. We need that. Part of the recovery process is having the right support around you. If you don't have that, then I pray right now that you would be led to people who would be that kind of support and encouragement. And if you do, I want to encourage you, be open and honest with them. Let them know how much you appreciate them. Let them know how much you rely on them, especially if you've never actually had that conversation. Say, hey, I just want you to know it's like Grey's Anatomy. Okay. My wife and I watched Grey's Anatomy since the very beginning. Now I haven't watched the last season or so. I've been too busy. I just kind of let her fill me in. I'm still not over the fact that Alex is gone. But early on in the show, Christina and Grey, that they were each other's person, right? Who's your person? Who are your people? Are you relying on them? Are you listening to them? Are you pressing into them? It's such an important part. It's not the only part that we need to recover. We need to be faithful. We need to be consistent. We need to be focused. We need to put the right things into our minds. All those things. But who you've got supporting you, who you've got in your corner, that's a big part of it. I want you to know I'm in your corner. I love you. I appreciate you. I know that no matter what you're going through, whether things are good right now and you feel it's okay, that's good. You still have support. Whether everything's falling apart, know that you're not alone and you're loved. All right, guys, we'll be back with the next session real soon. I hope this speaks to you. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out. I'll talk to you later.